Hello and good evening to everyone listening. I don't know how many of you are in the chat just yet. StreamYard has not yet said, but tonight, no, we're not going to talk about the imminent and horrible things that may be happening between states in this country. No, we're not going to be talking about jackasses in Washington. No, we're not going to be even talking about Twitter. We're going to be talking about something awesome. X-Men. And specifically my era of X-Men, which was the 80s and early 90s, but specifically that 80s era that really had an effect on me. And joining me tonight to talk about it is Ginell.
Hello.
So let's see. Right now, it still says I have 0 people listening, so I don't know how many people are listening just yet.
Here, let me hop on Twitter and start retweeting notifications.
Yeah, if you could all just post on your social media, if you still have it, that I'm live right now. That would be much appreciated, and then we'll get started. But yeah, okay. I guess I'll just start now, giving a little bit of background. You know, when I was a teen, coming up in the late 80s, early 90s, starting around maybe 6th grade, junior high, and then into my teen years, I got into comics, got into X-Men. Prior to that, my first comic series that I was reading was The Transformers. Nice. And I'm sure you can guess why, because I loved the Transformers.
Because Transformers are awesome.
And yeah, because Transformers are awesome. And through Transformers, I got introduced to other Marvel titles. And damn, the X-Men were cool. It was that simple.
I came in 1990. The only comics I'd ever read were Archie, because my dad was into Archie as a kid, so he passed down some Archie to me. And I will never forget, it was X-Men #4, Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, and it was the introduction of Omega Red. Yeah. And I had never in my entire life seen anything like it. And the artwork blew my mind. And I was a bad friend. I pocketed it, took it. I still have it. And my friend knows I have it. When he came to visit a couple of years ago and I showed him, it's all torn up. I had to restaple it because I read it so much, the cover and the book came apart, but I have it in a bag, even though it's completely shredded. I never got rid of it. And it opened up the entire world of comics to me. It really struck me.
Yeah, that story arc specifically was really cool. I think that was one of the standouts of when the team finally reformed. For me, I guess getting into it, late elementary school, more like junior high, I came in the period, it was a really strange time for the X-Men because Claremont had taken them down this path that they kind of stopped being superheroes. It was more like it was about survival, if anything. There was the incident of the Mutant Massacre that went on, which is pretty self-explanatory, and then they had the whole arc with what was it?
Fall of the Mutants.
Yeah, Fall of the Mutants was the next one, and yeah, everyone thought they were dead. Remember?
Yes, and then Inferno happened. That's when they found out they were all alive.
Right, and then they were hiding out in the Outback.
Yes, and then what was the one that came after that, where they were brainwashed by the Genosians?
That was
Extinction Agenda.
That was great.
That one was fabulous.
That whole arc,
oh my god!
That whole arc. I mean, it just kept going, and you don't get this anymore. There was a time in which X-Men was bi-monthly.
Yes.
Can you believe that they were that prolific? The art was still good. And there was so much story to tell. You could get it. It was coming out twice a month. Plus, you had all the ancillary titles that still coherently fit in to continuity.
Because they were all written by Claremont, and he had a grand plan that was amazing.
So, I mean, you weren't just reading one comic series. I mean, you really were reading a world. And you would know, okay, well, this is what's going on here in New Mutants and over here with Excalibur. And it was just the way. Oh, and then X Factor.
Oh, yes. The original X Factor was fantastic.
And so the way that they tied it all together like that was just amazing.
Yeah, and what was really good about the ancillaries was that I can't speak tonight. I'm sorry, I'm stumbling over my words. So I will say spin-offs. They had their own spin-offs. Like, do you remember the Exterminators when the kids went out as the Exterminators? They had Boom Boom and
Yeah.
Skids and Rusty, and then there was also the Fallen Angels arc, which had Sunspot, where they went off to another dimension called Coconut Grove.
No, actually, see, that was one of the problems is there were so many titles and, you're a teenager, you only have a little bit of money.
Well, I got lucky. When I got together with my now husband, he had been collecting since the 80s. And so I was introduced to this treasure trove of backlog. And I, within like 3 weeks, went through the entire 80s arc of all the X-Men titles. Like, I would seriously come home and read till like 2 o'clock in the morning, sleep for a little bit, get up, go to work, come back, and just keep reading. And so that's probably why I got to read them all, because luckily I married a man that had the entire X-Men library.
About 2 years ago, I just kind of went on a binge of, I can afford it now. And I tried to get every single collected edition and graphic novel I could.
Mm-hmm.
I still cannot locate the collected Essentials #9, which is the one I need to complete it. But yeah, I grabbed as many of the spin-off titles as I could. I read them all in order, got the parts I missed. And the thing that really stuck with me, a couple things about Claremont's writing, was that, one, it was still good.
Yes.
This wasn't like you're a teenager and you come back to it and you're like, I guess you can never go home. It's like, no, he may be wordy and overwrite a lot, way
Yes.
overwrite.
Hey,
But it
he's
was
nothing
still
like
good.
Bendis and King, though. Oh, dear God.
Yeah.
At least he's not as wordy as they are now.
Yeah. Well, there was at least a point to it. And he had a style to his writing, which we don't see much of that anymore. I mean, Miller definitely has a writing style. But Claremont definitely had his own voice as well. There wasn't this kind of boxed, I guess, what do they call it? Condensed writing now.
Yeah.
And they don't even do that anymore. Now it's just like propaganda pamphlets.
Well, I mean, have you seen the pages now? Like, you see actually people still doing beautiful artwork, but it's taken up by so many dialogue bubbles you can't see it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm thankful that Claremont never did that. But yes, he was wordy sometimes, but there was always a reason to the wordiness. Yeah, it wasn't propaganda. It was literally explanation. I sometimes thought maybe that was because some people would be jumping in the middle, like a first-time reader, so it would help them understand what was going on.
Yeah, everyone was, it was kind of still a mystery, but yeah, he tried to actually make it so that you could still jump in if you missed something, which I appreciated. But yeah, getting back to that whole arc, from everything from the Mutant Massacre to, I guess, the Outback saga, the Extinction Agenda, and then the group reforming, that whole arc was in itself, I think, a major accomplishment. But what really stood out to me going back a second time was realizing, they really aren't superheroes.
No, they were never meant to be superheroes.
They
At least
really
that's how
were.
I took it.
Yeah, they were really more functioning as kind of this, misfit tribe just trying to survive in an incredibly hostile world and waging a war to some degree with Genosha and a few others. You had the whole thing with the Reavers. I mean, it was just cool. But the other thing that struck me was that Claremont had a talent for making, C, D, even, grade Z level characters and making them A-list cool characters, where he'd taken nobody and within a year or two reimagine that character or put them through an arc that suddenly made them compelling and interesting. And you start going down the line and realizing how many characters, oh yeah, maybe he didn't create it, but he made that character cool.
Well, a perfect example is Psylocke. I mean, he snagged her from the Marvel UK titles. I mean, she was known as Captain Britain's brother, who was always sister, who was always a damsel in distress. She, I don't know how many alternate copies of Brian had tried to rape her over storylines. And Claremont brought her over to the X-Men. And all of a sudden, she kicked ass. She got really cool armor. She learned not to be afraid of her powers. I mean, her first encounter with Sabretooth, she basically fried his frontal lobe. And then that's when Wolverine was like, "Hey, you're totally welcome to join the X-Men. You took out Sabretooth and you have no fighting skill."
Right.
I mean, like, and then this is an X-Men, but if you go even back further, he took Miss Marvel, and her stories actually didn't suck, and that's when he introduced Mystique came from. I didn't know this until recently that Mystique actually first appearance was Ms. Marvel, and he took all of them and brought them over to the X-Men, and
made them cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but I thought Carol Danvers was best as binary. She was a living star.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and that whole arc where, Rogue took her mind, but then Professor Xavier let Rogue in because he was like, she's a mutant, I've got to help her. It was that betrayal that Carol felt. I mean, it was palpable. And that was all Claremont.
Yeah. Another one that stands out, and then I do want to get back to Psylocke, was that he took Dazzler.
Yes.
And made Dazzler a great character.
I have a confession to make. Yeah. Dazzler is my favorite X-Men character because originally, do you remember the arcade game? Actually, you know what? I'd say the arcade game and that pilot that they did in the 80s, Pride of the X-Men, that was actually my original introduction to X-Men. I take that back. To the comic was in the 90s, but I knew about the X-Men because I would play that game religiously when I would go to arcades with my dad. And so Dazzler, Dazzler along with Gambit are my two favorite characters. So I admit I am a Dazzler fan.
Well, Gambit's kind of like the Han Solo of the Marvel Universe. I mean,
I love it. And Han Solo is my favorite Star Wars character. But, there's a pattern.
But, with Dazzler, she was a cheap, stupid character to jump on a trend. And by the time she came out, the trend was dead.
Oh, I know. She was, I forget, what, not Virgin
Records. The disco singing light disco ball. Her powers were essentially a disco ball. She had roller skates, and she was a disco singer.
She was originally called Disco Queen, and she was African American. And they made a deal with the, I cannot remember the record company, but it was a promotional thing for Marvel and this record company. But by the time it got off the ground, disco had died. I mean, Claremont even puts that line in the introduction with Dazzler when they go to the club that she's singing at. Cyclops says, so this is where discos go to die. It was a subtle dig at the original concept of the character.
And what happens is she goes through this phase of trying to reorder her life, realizing she can't be a pop star anymore because she's a mutant, and there's all this backlash, and she goes through that weird Joan Jett phase, and
when she was with Lila Cheney. Yeah, that's right.
And what was weird was also how many clubs Claremont mentioned that were real, including BDSM stuff. I swear Chris Claremont was into BDSM and probably a sub.
He had to be, because the Hellfire Club was way too detailed. I mean, those outfits on the ladies, and I miss those outfits so much. Oh my God, seeing Emma Frost when she was the White Queen and she was a villain wearing that white leather with the fur cape. I mean, it was like, damn.
And I've got a weird suspicion about one of his fetishes, just a thought. I have this feeling that Claremont has a thing for innocent redheads who then go dark and become domineering and become the dom and start beating everyone down. Just because that theme keeps repeating over and over.
You're right.
Yeah,
Jean Grey is the original Black Queen. Then Madeline Pryor is the Goblin Queen. And even Rachel Grey, she shows up in red leather and spikes.
Right. And then the Apocalypse future is all bondage.
Oh, yeah, totally. They're all tattooed and they've got belts. I forgot about that.
So I've got a sneaking suspicion that, as he was touring the country doing conventions, that he might have been hitting the DNA Club and was at the Power Exchange in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. I just got a feeling.
I forgot that he mentioned Power Exchange.
Yeah, see, as a teenager, I had no idea what that stuff was. I went to college in the Bay Area, and I'm reading it and going like, holy shit, that's real.
No, you know what? I thought the Hellfire Club was a made-up thing until I was reading history books, and I
Oh,
was
yeah.
like, holy shit, this is real. Like, that just blew my mind. And so many important characters, or not characters, I should say people, because they're not characters, but people in history were part of the Hellfire Club. And it's just like, holy shit.
And the fact that the Hellfire Club itself wasn't exactly evil, it was just a mutant supremacist group who essentially had the same idea as Professor X, but not with with the idea of that they would get along and present the image of being nice, friendly mutants, but really be in charge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They were the BDSM oligarchy
Yeah.
of the Marvel universe. There, what's another one? Oh, another enemy that had it was really kind of creepy though, but had some BDSM themes was Nanny and Orphan Maker. If I'm remembering correctly, didn't Orphan Maker have a leather outfit with the belts too? And he kept growing out of his armor because she was force growing him. He was actually a child in an adult's body.
Oh, I don't think I read that one.
It was right in between Inferno and Extinction Agenda.
Okay,
And when
what?
the Reavers came back, because she's the one that turned Storm into a little kid.
You know what? Okay. Yeah, I remember Storm turning into a kid, but what happens is I said I went and got all the books I could.
You don't have that one, do you? That's the one you're missing?
I've got all what it was I was able to grab all these individual graphic novels that followed story arcs, and then I have the Essentials 8, which has all the gaps.
Gotcha.
Until I get to 9, and I don't have the gaps in that one, and that was one of the gaps in the story.
Because that's another one, the Shadow King, because when Storm turns into a child and she's running away, the Shadow King has decided to hunt her down again. And he actually takes people and turns them into hounds, and they're wearing the same leather spike outfits that Rachel Gray dons in Excalibur.
Well, that's because she was one of the hounds.
That's right. She was Ahab's hound.
Yeah, that's why she actually had the outfit. Some of it was like, wasn't it like she couldn't remove some of the spikes and the tattoos?
The tattoos were permanent. Like Bishop, they explained it had one of Bishop's storylines explained why the tattoos were permanent. You could never, it was like locked into your DNA. And so that's why she always used her power to cover up the spikes, or not the spikes, the tattoos.
But then getting back to Psylocke, he took that character as far as he could. But then I remember even in the letter columns, people saying, Betsy just comes across as really bitter and bitchy now. And it was very clear that he didn't know where to take her. And then he had the whole Mandarin story arc.
That was one of the... Oh, go ahead.
The symbolic brainwashing they put her through, where it has her actually facing up to the fact that she could never live up to her brother, Captain Britain, and that she kills him in the dream. And
she kills all the X-Men in the dream too, to get the rings of power. Because that was another good villain. Mojo and Spiral were involved in that too. That was brilliant.
I think the first X-Men I actually purchased was an event title. It was their part of the Evolutionary War, and they were in the Savage Land. And that was just a really cool standalone story on its own. But then the secondary story was in Mojo World with the X-Babies, where it was like the Muppet Babies with the X-Men.
Yes, I remember the X-Babies. Oh, God. And
the thing was, that had an influence on me, too, because it was so screwed up.
Yes. Oh, my God, yes. Okay. I remember that. The High Evolutionary arc, I think, is the one you're talking about. Yeah.
Right.
Because, they all end up... That also is where... Polaris ended up losing her powers to her sister, Zaladane, and then they kind of wrote Zaladane off. Like she got killed off or something, and never explained how Zaladane was related to Lorna Dane, because Zaladane came from the Khazar and Shiana books.
Oh, the
with
Savage Land.
yeah, the Savage Land books with the petrified man and all that. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden she became Lorna Dane's sister and she stole her powers, and Lorna Dane ended up getting a secondary mutation.
She hulks out.
Yeah, she hulked. I actually liked that. She looked really cool.
Is she not like that anymore?
Oh no, dude.
No. They should have stuck with that. That was great.
They've done her a disservice because they have decided to go back to her being incredibly mentally unstable. She's got some sort of mental illness. She's Magneto's daughter now for sure. In fact, she's
so it's boring, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and she's unstable like her father. At least that's the last thing I remember. I just checked out.
I just remember that
really?
That was kind of interesting because, again, bringing up Claremont's thing for taking a good girl and having her go evil and torment her lover.
Yes.
That happened with Polaris, where she gets possessed by I forget who.
Malice.
Torments the hell out of Havoc. And then she finally gets herself back. She loses her ability and mutates into this kind of ripped woman and kind of comes to terms with herself. I was like, again, a character that was kind of confused got really cool.
Yes, he did take a lot of crap characters and turn them cool. Like even when I thought Havoc became more cool when he went through Siege Perilous, lost his memory, and became a Genosian magistrate.
Yeah.
They allowed him to use his mutant power to hunt down other mutants. I was like, holy shit, this guy has become exactly who he never wanted to be, but he's so cool now. It's like, the
only one. Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, same thing with Rogue in a sense that
absolutely.
he made her go through hell in Genosha. Like, I mean, the fact that she was traumatized so badly that Carol Danvers took over.
Well, I read that a little more recently. So it wasn't just that she was traumatized. Carol crawled up out of her mind and said, look, you don't have any powers anymore. I'm a soldier. I don't need powers to kick ass. You're going to let me drive. You're going to put me at the driver's wheel. You're going to take a back seat and I'm going to get us out of here.
That's right, because then her and Wolverine use their military skills and get the hell out.
Right. And during that time, there's that whole awkward, the person that version of Carol Danvers is still, in love with Logan.
Yes.
She's still stuck in that time period.
Yes.
Great. The comics aren't like that anymore.
No, there's such a disappointment. Like I don't let my kid read comics. We've offered to get him comics, but we plan on going to back issues. Instead, we introduced him to manga.
Yeah. Okay, we got some questions or comments.
Okay.
Elton asks, and Elton, what do you think of when Polaris hulked out? I thought that was pretty hot. Okay, Elton, are we going to talk about Morph, the man, the myth?
Well, which version of Morph? Are we talking about Age of Apocalypse, or are we talking about old school X-Men, like the original 60s version when it was the original 5?
I think we're sticking to the 80s, late 80s, early 90s era. Morph.
Okay, so then we'll do Age of Apocalypse. Morph kicked ass in Age of Apocalypse. He was brilliant. He was, to me, I thought he was the heart of the team, because even though they had gone through hell and back, the world had been nuked, they were on the verge of entire, not just global, but actual like reality extinction, because the M'Kron crystal was never repaired by Jean Grey. So it was consuming reality. He kept a smile. And when they get on his ass about it, they finally realize he's keeping a smile, even though he's just as miserable as the rest of us, because he's trying to keep morale high. And if that makes everybody hate him, that's fine. But he is distracting everybody from the horrible shit they have all gone through. So that's my take on Morph. I hope that's a good take.
So just remember, everyone, in the coming year, be like Morph.
Yes, be like Morph.
Okay. Jason Simpkins. Claremont was always moving through. There were always plots and that kept moving the story. Yeah, and he'd have, I don't know if he just had notes upon notes with graphs or if he just had it in his head, but it was obvious he could drop a plot, wait maybe 4 issues, and then come back or even pick it up in another book, and it still was good.
Yep. It's a shame what Jim Lee did to him.
Yeah, we'll get into that later. That
Okay,
was
yeah.
really under that.
I've lost a lot of respect for Jim Lee in the last 5 years.
Well, oh, did you not know that Jim had done that?
No. I learned a lot about Jim Lee in the last 5 years. In fact, Jim Lee was one of my comic book heroes along with Claremont, you know?
Mhm.
And then I found out who Jim Lee really was. I was like, dude, it's like they say, never meet your heroes, you know? Like a lot of my favorite artists and writers have actually turned out to be shit human beings. But I guess that's just the climate for
Yeah.
today.
Simpkins disagrees with you about the art. He says it's worse now. And I would say in mainstream comics, absolutely.
Oh, mainstream comics, yes. Yes. But I have seen it was one of the Superman issues, and I think it had a guest artist, and they just pasted Bendis's the whole
Crap over top of it.
yeah, and I was just like, damn. But yeah, 99% of comic book art today that's mainstream is absolute hot garbage.
I remember reading Powers, the book that kind of made Bendis a household name.
Mm-hmm.
And reading it, it was okay. I mean, it was a cop procedural. I thought that was kind of cool. But reading the graphic novel was like, dude, just write a fucking novel. I can't even see what's going on.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know if he just is afraid to write novels or if it's just, he gets the easy money by just basically writing a novel and shoving it into a comic book.
Yeah, well, the thing is he obviously likes to write dialogue and nothing else.
Yes.
And he may not be very good at writing the rest of the prose, just the
dialogue.
Yeah. Okay. Dominic Powell. Claremont knew how to do a long-form storytelling and leave seeds that would eventually pay off. Each issue was serialized, but underneath there was an overarching story. Yes, and that's why I loved this era so much, and why Ginell and I have been wanting to talk about it. Because one, I think we can both agree, right, that this had massive influence on us, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like
Growing up.
X-Men. Yeah, X-Men was my life. In fact, I was mocked at school for being the girl that was obsessed with X-Men. So it definitely formed my life, man. I'll tell you.
And yeah, there is something about, you're a teenager, you feel awkward, you don't fit in, especially if you really don't fit in. I mean, every teenager doesn't feel like they fit in, but
oh no,
some of us really didn't.
No, I was extremely socially awkward. My maturity level at the time frame was not as, how do I want to put it? I could be the age 16 and my maturity level at the time frame was like 14. It's like I didn't get any of those social cues, so yeah, X-Men is where I basically ran to that was my safe zone.
You had these stories about people facing tremendous odds, being disliked, being discriminated against, not fitting in no matter what they do, and fighting back. It didn't matter how much they got beaten up, they kept pushing. Did not matter how bleak it looked, they kept going. Now, there's a great comment here from Yan Zhao. Claremont crowded up a lot of pages with word bubbles. Jim Lee in revenge. Word bubbles. Jim Lee in revenge for taking the series over.
You know what? I noticed that when Jim Lee was given when they split the titles to X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, I noticed that there was a lot more dialogue as the stories went on, especially issue 8 is a very good example of starting to overcrowd. If you go back and read issue 8, that's where Belladonna shows up and is like, hey, I'm actually Gambit's wife, and everybody's like, oh, holy shit, what? There is a lot of talking, especially Belladonna and Gambit explaining the how the guilds work in New Orleans. So that explains a lot. I did not think about that, but you're right.
And for me, the moment Claremont, I mean, I read the issues that John Byrne wrote with Lee, but then after that, I dropped the title. I mean, they got Fabian
Nicieza.
Yeah, I was done. It's like it's not there anymore. This is just a comic book now.
I think I got lucky because, like I said, I originally picked up X-Men in the 90s. So when Claremont had already left. So by the time I actually was going out and buying all my comic books for the first time, it was Fabian Nicieza. So when I started buying back issues,
It suddenly
I was
got
like,
really, really
holy
good.
shit. Yeah. And I blew, oh my gosh, I really liked doing chores because I'd get my allowance money and then just go down to the local comic book store and blow it all on back issues.
Yep. I would get on my 10-speed bike, ride down to the comic store. Same thing.
Yep.
And, you know, the thing in the 80s and early 90s, you come in the comic book store and it was just wall-to-wall books. And it's like, I wish I could afford to read all of these.
Exactly. I mean, I can remember the first time I came across Heavy Metal magazine in a comic book store. I was like, oh my God. But I had all my X-Men titles. And I was like, oh, do I do Heavy Metal magazine? Do I keep reading like these X-Men issues that I've been wanting to catch up on? Usually X-Men 1.
And okay, you know, since Jim Lee keeps coming up, we'll just explain so everybody understands.
Okay.
Claremont took the X-Men, which were essentially a B-list title, maybe a C-list title at the time, and made it the top-selling title of Marvel. So popular that it had a ton of spin-off series and was being released twice a month. And it was just making crazy money. It was the best thing that was out at the time. It was, you know, the thing everybody talked about in comics. He takes them through this incredible story arc, you know, from, again, the Mutant Massacre to the Extinction Agenda to the team reforming and meeting back up with Professor X. And then suddenly Magneto comes back. And then because Jim Lee decides he wants to write, they fire Claremont then and there.
And the way they did it was so crappy too, because Claremont would be giving him the scripts and Jim Lee would draw something else to fit the way he wanted the story to go. And then by issue 8, it had become clear that Jim Lee had basically hijacked the book.
Yeah.
And so Claremont left after issue 8 because the Gambit storyline was something that was supposed to be so different. And you can also tell that Lee was kind of buddy-buddy with Whilce Portacio, who was doing the Uncanny, because he introduced Bishop. That was his original creation. All of a sudden, Bishop is showing up in the regular X-Men comic book, and it like basic, what's the word I'm looking for? Influencing the Blue Team storyline too.
Yeah.
The original Gambit storyline was supposed to be that Gambit was just a cloned body of Sinister.
Oh, is that why his eyes are that way?
Yes, and Sinister was putting a part of himself in it. Now, they actually covered when Claremont did X-Men The End, he did that storyline. You find out Gambit is actually a clone mixture of Cyclops and Sinister, and he is the third Summers brother. That was how this was all supposed to work out. Anyway, Sinister actually does fall in love with Rogue, and so he snatches back the clone body and pulls his consciousness out. That was what was supposed to happen. You were supposed to find out all of a sudden Sinister is now fallen in love with an X-Man, this like part of him.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the original storyline. Gambit was actually a clone of Mr. Sinister and Cyclops, which is why he had the eyes. They were both characters had red eyes, and he was supposed to be the spy to spy on Cyclops. That's why he was put on the Blue Team. There was a whole arc, man. I'm telling you.
I had read some interviews about what he had planned for the whole Sinister arc, and to find out we never got it because of Jim Lee.
Yeah,
and then Jim Lee left shortly after to start Image.
Yes.
So he steals Claremont's book, does a shitty job, then leaves to do essentially an X-Men ripoff.
Oh yeah, him and Liefeld and Portacio, not Silvestri.
Silvestri was a great artist.
Oh God, dude. Okay, don't laugh at me, but I love the fact that he drew all the X-women with full lips. Oh, I love those lips. I loved how he drew the X-women. They were gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No argument.
No, that like I am a very straight woman, but I can appreciate the female form, and oh my God, they were beautiful. Not only that, he captured the epitome of 80s beauty. So they had the big hair and they wore the asymmetrical leopard print outfits when they would be out on the town, and they were just gorgeous.
Well, that was one of the things that caught my eye in the 80s about the X-Men too, was the fact that, you know, they really did look like misfits and outcasts. I mean, Rogue was kind of total new wave. And then Dazzler had kind of, again, she went through the Joan Jett phase, and then she went through the Debbie Gibson phase.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you've got Rogue going punk when she loses her powers.
Yeah. And Storm still retains some of that punk rock, but she also kind of matured. So she had the half mohawk, I want to call it.
Yeah.
Where it was like the front part of the head was shaved, but became a crest in the back. She looked cool. And then
the thing that bugged me was when they kept drawing so much reflection on her costume that one day it stopped being black and it was white.
White.
I hated that.
I have to admit, since I first came into X-Men when she had the white costume, I liked it. But when I went back and saw the black costumes, I was like, oh, but those are so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I've always loved the cape. I mean, I'm so glad they've kept the cape. I don't know if they have the cape now, but Claremont kept that really cool cape that she had since the 70s.
Okay, this actually, I don't know if this really counts, but I'll try and answer it anyway. Owen asks, how do you develop a writing style? I'm still working on finding one along with improving my art. Should I answer that, or should...
Go for it, because we're talking about X-Men, and X-Men inspired me to actually start drawing because I wanted to be a comic book artist. And the fact that Owen's doing it and posting his artwork and actually really kicking ass at doing what he wants to do, I say go for it.
Okay, Owen, the thing about writing style, and this is a pain in the ass, is that pretty much everyone starts by imitating the ones they admire. And they start kind of aping their style or styles of people they like. That is just normal, because you have a point of reference. That's where you're going to start from anyway. You have a goal you want to reach. You want to write something as good as, well, like Claremont or Stephen King. You want to be that cool. So of course, you're going to start borrowing those styles. And you read interviews with writers who are honest, like Ray Bradbury said for a long time, he kept trying to imitate H.P. Lovecraft. That's just one example. And that's very, very common. William Gibson used to try and imitate, I believe, Bester. But over time, as you age and you write and you develop as a person, I mean, that's part of the thing with writing, is that most writers mature slowly. They don't really find their voice until a little later in life. It's just the nature of the art form. And I think that has to do partially with experience. But the day I knew that I actually had a style of my own was when I was reading my own work and looking back and realizing there was a specific cadence to the wording, a way that the descriptions were put together, the sentence structure and the word choices, and kind of the poetry of the language, and I hadn't tried to do it. So it's kind of an organic process. It's not something you just do. I mean, there are also people who specialize in trying to sound like someone else, ghostwriters, for instance. So really, my advice to you is just keep doing what you're doing. And you'll hit that point where you just, one day you'll realize, oh my God, I have a style. It's when you're not even trying. I hope maybe that'll answer it. Buddy Smith asks, have you wondered how things would have been if Mystique stayed as Miss Marvel villain, which she was going to be an alien?
I never even thought about that, because she just ended up being a mutant. But yeah, the fact that she was an alien, I forget about that. Because I
didn't even know that.
Claremont had drawn, it was kind of obvious in the way that she had, not Claremont had drawn, but I guess the direction to draw her was kind of obvious, that she was more alien-like in the Ms. Marvel books. I remember that, like her eyes, she looked kind of like a gray, but she had blue skin and yellow eyes, and she had the hair, but she had kind of that facial structure. But I never knew if she was supposed to be a spy for the Kree, or if she was just some random alien that had her own beef with Miss Marvel. They never really explained. Maybe they did, and I just didn't read those issues. But yeah, if you go look up Miss Marvel Mystique, you can see that her face was a lot more alien-like.
Cool. Again, I'm learning stuff. And just
honestly, pick
Yeah.
up the Miss Marvel arcs. Like if you want to just get, I try not to push Amazon anymore because reasons. But if you want to, like I got mine a long time ago on Kindle, and it was super cheap. I ended up getting the entire Ms. Marvel Masterworks that was Claremont's arc, and it's really good. I highly recommend it. He makes Miss Marvel not suck. That's what I will say. She actually doesn't suck. She actually starts kind of getting a brain of her own. Not so much as like feminism go, but like, oh my gosh, I'm having adventures and kicking people's ass, and it was really good.
Okay, Wolf has a statement of fact, not really a question. Let's face it, Claremont should have stayed with the X-Men. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say not today.
Oh,
He's been
he's old and out of touch.
pandering a little. It's kind of freaking me out. I'm like, please don't.
He's old and out of touch. It's so simple.
Yeah,
People get old.
He tried to make a comeback with the X-Men with the X-Men Forever comic book that he tried to pick up his original storyline from X-Men before Jim Lee screwed him over.
Yeah.
And it just didn't do well. Like he ended up killing off Wolverine, and Jean Grey was actually in love with Wolverine, so her and Cyclops broke up, but then Wolverine dies, so she ends up with Beast. Storm ended up not
that sounds
growing.
more like he was just trying to shock the audience.
Well, it gets weirder. He ended up possessing Storm's body with another character who was a male that got stuck in her body. And meanwhile, Storm was actually still a child and had never grown up. And so this guy that was in Storm's body ends up electrocuting Wolverine to death. So there was like everything burned off his body and nothing was left but the adamantium skeleton or something. Like it was bizarre. I was like, if this was really what you were planning to go with,
no,
maybe
he wasn't.
Yeah.
It was obvious that he was probably trying to get attention at that point, that the book wasn't selling.
Yeah, it was beyond bizarre. Like it totally broke all the storylines that he was going with. You know what I mean? And to kill off Wolverine in the first issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Jason Simpkins, K-Tel. I don't catch the reference.
K-Tel, isn't that one of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard?
Maybe, I don't know.
Or is that a Starjammer? Oh, now I want to go back and pull out all my long boxes and start going through everything. Trying to remember.
Buddy Smith. He also had young female friendships that bordered on lesbianism. I think he did originally want to make Storm gay or bi, and it just wasn't time, I guess, so they wouldn't let him.
Dude, you could tell. I mean, this is
it
just
kind of seemed like it.
Maybe I read too much into it, but sometimes I thought there was a little, honest to God, sexual tension between Storm and Callisto. Like, it was like, what are you going with here, man? It goes back to that BDSM thing. Okay, so it wasn't just me. Okay. Because,
here we go.
Yeah, she just dominated her, basically.
Panther God. Yeah, Claremont is a freak. I remember the Ileana Enchantress Kitty Pryde lesbian interfere.
Oh.
Well, there was the other one that was a little creepier that I thought kind of bordered on way too inappropriate, which was the Kitty Pryde Colossus flirting.
But was that him? I didn't think that was him. I thought that was somebody else before he came in.
Oh, was that not him? Okay, if that wasn't him, never mind.
I thought it was Claremont that's why Kitty Pryde, I think, went off to another team eventually, and also they just became best buds. And she was even she was dating the Beyonder at one point before he revealed himself to be the Beyonder. That's when they were in San Francisco with Jessica Drew, when she was not Spider-Woman. She was just a detective.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Panther God. Hellfire Club was real. Ben Franklin was a member. Occult Sex Club.
Why am I? Ben Franklin was a horn dog.
Oh yeah.
Dude, the stories.
Yeah.
You could You could actually just, if you ever wanted to do one of these episodes on history, if you were ever inclined, you could spend like one episode alone on his sexual adventures in France
Oh
when
yeah, what
he
did you
was
do in
the
France,
ambassador
huh?
to France for the US.
But interestingly enough, he went to France and then came back and said, guys, this is what we don't want to do.
Yes. Well, this is totally off topic, but my dad, being a history teacher, told me about how John Adams also got assigned to France at the time frame and was completely opposite of Franklin, and how John Adams would wake up early in the morning, and when he would be waking up, Franklin would be stumbling back in after a night of drunken orgy, and they just hated each other for it. And that's how Franklin got Adams sent away from France as an ambassador, because he's like, he's crimping my style. Like, I can't party because he's always looking down at me.
Oh shit.
For real, I'm telling you, man. Like, I wish more people would do podcasts on Ben Franklin and his sleazy side. They would be great.
Yeah,
But
that actually would make for great history. Just what would you call that? Like honest history?
yes, honest history. Because yeah, I'm telling you.
Jazz Crab. Compact Discs presents. The shit with the Reavers and Gateway was dope. My favorite. Yeah, I loved that arc. I thought that was just really cool. There was such a Road Warrior aspect to it as well.
Oh yeah, it was heavily influenced by the Road Warrior, and there wasn't enough. There was never enough Reavers. Like they
No.
showed up, they made an impact, and then they were gone. It's like, why are you? They were so cool. Except it introduced Jubilee. I wasn't cool with that. No.
Wasn't that Jim Lee's doing?
Was that Jim Lee's doing? Because I remember her being drawn by Silvestri.
I don't remember.
I thought that she was originally supposed to be mocking Robin from Batman because she had the same color scheme. She wore short shorts, had elf boots, had a yellow jacket instead of
And
a
the
yellow
glasses.
cape. Yes, I think she was meant to mock Batman and Robin, and then Jim Lee got a hold of her.
Although I got to admit, the whole Mandarin arc with Psylocke, Wolverine, and Jubilee was hilarious.
Yes, especially when Jubilee looked down her shirt because her boobs weren't as big as Psylocke's, and she pouted.
Well, it was just, the whole arc with the Mandarin trying to civilize her.
Yes. Trying to civilize this like 11-year-old kid.
Yeah. This 11-year-old mall rat.
From Beverly Hills.
That was another thing, is Claremont could write comedy, which is also another rarity and not easy to do in comics. Okay, Dominic Powell. Madeline Pryor deserves better. It's sad she became a tragic, dangerous member of the X-Men's Rogue Gallery.
Oh man, you know what? Madeline Pryor's arc was heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Especially when her own son rejected her for Jean Grey. It was like her last shred of humanity. Any sort of good she would have in her was destroyed because her baby boy rejected her for Jean Grey. That, like, you could feel that. I had sympathy for her. It hurt. It's like, this poor woman is a clone, gets married because she looks like the deceased lover of Cyclops. He abandons her and their kid, and then she dies and he doesn't care. It's just, her story arc was so sad.
Yeah. And the whole thing where the demons were slowly kind of driving her nuts and corrupting her.
There was a cool scene in the arc where Wolverine, her, and Rogue get kidnapped by the Genosians, where she tells them not to experiment on her, or something really bad will happen. And then there's just a massacre.
It's because what it drew one of the demons out of her, didn't it?
Yeah, and it just I just remember seeing the blood splattered everywhere, but she's totally fine on the table. Yeah, that was a good one.
Wolf 10 explains that they're trying to make the mental illness because I'm special crowd with appeal to the mental. They're trying to appeal to the mental illness because I'm special crowd with Lorna, it seems.
Absolutely, yeah. When Lorna started going crazy, when they started really pushing, like, everybody needs to pay attention to mental illness, and maybe they were trying to do a good thing, but yeah, she's just she's fragile now. She's not like the cool Polaris from the 80s and early 90s that, you know, actually kicked ass. It's just, yeah. They've taken all of Claremont's characters that he built up and they smacked them back down.
You know, as far as I'm concerned, for me, the X-Men ended after about roughly the Omega Red arc. That's pretty much when I realized it was pretty much almost gone. I mean, there was also the bit with Wolverine re-encountering Sabretooth. And that was pretty good.
Oh, is that the one? Are you talking about the one where he had the, oh, what is it? It's that Japanese sword that steals souls.
Yeah.
And he's able to fight. I was actually happy they killed off Sabretooth, and I was really pissed they brought him back after that, because that was a great send-off. Like, he perma-killed him. It was great. For me, X-Men ended during Onslaught, the Onslaught crisis, where Xavier and Magneto merged into Onslaught and killed all the characters in the Marvel Universe so they could reboot the Marvel Universe.
I'm glad I missed that.
Yeah, it was, they all ended up in a alternate world that lived in Franklin Richards' little bouncy ball, because he was a toddler, and he with his mutant powers put all the dead characters in there to live, and then he was taken care of by the X-Men. I mean, it was bizarre. It was putting it nicely.
I'm glad I never read any of that. Okay. Unqualified comics. God damn it. How did I not get invited for this? Get to invite for this. Also, thumbnail is a lie. That's the 90s X-Men. Look, I tried to find a good picture for the 80s X-Men in a very short period of time that would fit the dimensions of the backdrop here, and nothing good was coming up that wasn't cluttered with speech bubbles. So I figured, okay, this is right after they all reunite. Good enough. Maybe not.
It was on the cusp. It was on the cusp. It was. It still had the 80s feel. It was just the 90s at this point, and it was 90. So
yeah,
I mean,
I wanted to get Rogan her old classic new wave outfit, but I couldn't find a good one.
You know what? Look up Art Adams' X-Men artwork. He did that fantastic 80s poster that has X Factor and the 80s X-Men on it, along with Nightcrawler and Shadowcat. Oh, I'll have to find a picture for you, because I actually have the poster on my wall. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's got all the 80s X-Men, and it includes Shadowcat and Nightcrawler and not Excalibur, and then it has all of the original X Factor and Sunfire. So
he's got the whole group. He just captured in one go.
Yes.
Okay, Yan Zhao says he and a lot of the Image guys had their own ideas of what the X-Men should be. They wanted Magneto back as the big bad guy. There's a great documentary on Amazon Prime, Chris Claremont's X-Men. I'll need to see that. Because Claremont had really gone out of his way to move past the whole Magneto era and was building up Sinister and his the Marauders as the new counter arch enemies of the X-Men. And it was no longer going to be the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants and Magneto.
It was actually, he was building up Apocalypse at the same time for that whole like Sinister working for Apocalypse thing too, because that was X Factor's major bad guy was Apocalypse.
Yeah.
And then Excalibur just had the rest of the multiverse and magic to do. They had to deal with the magic from the UK, so they kind of went off on their own thing.
Do you know who was writing the UK comics? Or
is Chris Claremont also wrote Excalibur?
Oh, okay. So he did all of them.
Yes. At one point, he was doing New Mutants. He was doing the Uncanny X-Men, and he was doing X Factor. And I think the same thing that happened with him to X-Men is also what happened with New Mutants, because Liefeld became the artist.
Yeah,
and then Liefeld had one of his I guess you'd say notorious hissy fits, and ended up getting New Mutants canceled and turned into X-Force.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Nobody had feet.
That's right. Also, Cable was never meant to be Cyclops' son. He was supposed to be a future version of Ahab come back to get revenge on the X-Men.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very obvious that's where they were taking it, and that was really cool. And that scene where "What's the matter, Gam?" or "What's the matter?" You see somebody you remember, someone you see someone who looks familiar.
Yes.
And that was such a trip.
And what was so funny though is the way they turned him into Cyclops' son. So then the guy that was Rachel Gray's biggest nightmare ended up becoming her brother. I mean, like, what a weird twist.
And I know that was done strictly because everyone had figured it out, which is like, don't change the storyline just because everyone figured it out. It means that you left the clues and they figured it out. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's okay if they figure it out. I mean, I don't know why all of a sudden I noticed this in the 90s. If fans started figuring it out, they would 180 and do something
Yeah,
else.
which ruined a lot of stories.
Well, they had the Executioner song is where they decided to say, oh no, he's not Ahab, he's actually the missing Nathan Summers.
Yeah. Okay, I tend to believe what Claremont said about Lee leaving had nothing to do with striking out on his own with the Image guys. Interesting. Well, I know that there was a lot of friction between Lee and the Image guys as well, wasn't there?
Well, I mean, that was 7 huge egos shoved into one comic book company.
Well, we all heard about the fist fight at
Wait,
the Image booth.
which fist fight? Was it Liefeld?
I believe it was Liefeld and Todd McFarlane.
Oh, I am not surprised.
Got in a fist fight.
Which is so funny because they were always billed together, you know? I mean, there was those comic book great videos that came out with Stan Lee, and McFarlane and Liefeld were part of that. Like, you always saw them together.
From what I understand, there was a signing or something, and the two of them were bickering. And at some point, Todd apparently got up and said something that they effective. Well, look, I can't afford this kind of shit because I don't get to do Blue Jeans ads with Spike Lee. And somewhere along there, there was a punch thrown, and that I don't know the whole story, but that's pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. I know that Liefeld was notorious for punching people, so.
Yeah, and apparently McFarlane towered over him. So,
have you seen McFarlane in real life? That guy's huge. Him and Silvestri are giants.
Are we talking like Jim Balance sized giant here?
Oh, forgive me. Who's Jim Balance?
Well, he's known now for tarot, but he was the one that drew Catwoman with the perfectly spherical boobs.
Oh, that guy.
That guy is like
that Catwoman.
He's like this string being of a man who's just really tall. But I won't say anything bad about him because he's so damn nice.
Now, his Catwoman the 90s Catwoman, the one that had the Dolly Parton chest and the tight purple outfit?
Yes.
Okay, I like that Catwoman, actually.
Well, he's a good artist when he wants to be.
Yeah, I guess they were the tall, skinny, gangly dudes.
Yeah. So. Okay. Dominic Powell says, have any of you seen the video on YouTube where it goes over Claremont's plans for the X-Men's titles when he left? No. If you could put that in the chat, or not the chat, the comments below, the comment section, I would appreciate that. Because I want to see that now.
So do I.
The kicked Claremont then had a bad placements left for Image. Okay, I think that's what that meant. Hey, Chicken Sith, what's up? Okay. Mr. Sinister never made any sense to me, says Endless Nocturne. Do you want to explain that?
Well, it depends. I guess I'll just go with the Claremont version. Mr. Sinister was meant to be, the way I saw him, he was supposed to be like the boogeyman in the shadows, whereas Magneto was like up front in your face, you know, mutant supremacy, I want to kill all humans. Mr. Sinister was like the guy in the shadows, the boogeyman underneath the bed that was much more scary and, in my opinion, much more frightening because you didn't really know what the guy was up to. And he had gathered together a group of mutants that half of them were psychos, like serial killers. These people, they killed and they liked it. You know, you had Harpoon and What's the guy? He was a technopath, just like Forge, except he had the parts on his uniform so he could build weapons right then and there. Grey Crow was his real name.
I liked Forge quite a bit,
Yeah, I
actually.
loved Forge.
And his whole Vietnam arc.
I am sad that they got rid of Forge and X-Men. They just it's like they didn't know what to do with him after Claremont left, so they dropped him. I mean, Forge was fantastic.
He was a great character because he'd go into these weird shamanic trances and build impossible machines that he didn't understand how they worked. He was obsessed with technology. He didn't like magic, but yet he was he had, magic in his blood. He was from a line of shaman. He had joined the military and had gone to Vietnam and had all these problems with war flashbacks. And because he was a shaman, the spirits of his dead buddies would actually start talking to him when he fugued out. It was a cool character.
I like the fact that Claremont was able to make a literal techno wizard, a person that could blend magic with technology, because those are polar opposites.
Right.
Yet Forge was able to do it. I mean, when him and it was the Fall of the Mutants arc where him and Storm finally got to be together again. He gave her powers back and they got to go live in paradise, and they had the choice of either staying in paradise and living in peace for the rest of their lives, what they always wanted, or they could go back and die. And they chose to go back and die. It was like that. Their tragic romance was so wonderful. And I was so sad when they dropped that, especially when they decided to put her with Black Panther. I was like, we're done.
Okay, Buddy Smith. I'm guessing Buddy Smith must be a hardcore fan because he seems to, few people in the chat seem to really know this stuff. I'm impressed. Buddy Smith says, problem with the X-Men nowadays is they're basically not outcasts anymore, but they're preppy kids pretending to be outcasts.
Are you kidding me? They're fascists now. They're evil. They're literally, they have their own country, the Krakoa Island, and only mutants can go there. They've
turned into Genosha?
Yeah, they've become the mutant version of Genosha. If they find out you're actually not a mutant, they just kick you off. That they did that to Franklin Richards. All of a sudden, he's not a mutant anymore either. And that was Dan Slott. That was Dan Slott being Dan Slott. So whatever, take it for what it is. But they're supposed to, apparently they're supposed to be these great heroes now that are fighting for the underdog. But I've read some of the books, and they're just outright assholes.
Yeah, it's really kind of a reflection of the difference in the culture and what I guess young people think outcasts are now. It means you're edgy and cool and above it all. Oh, well, I lost Ginell. That kind of sucks. Let's see. Device not connected. All right, let's see if I can't. Ginell, if your device is disconnected, there might be a thing down in the corner where it says mute. Click that again after you plug your mic back in. If you plug your mic back in right now, it still won't turn on. You have to hit the button down below that says mute to reactivate it. Okay, so I'll go through the comments and hopefully she'll rejoin us. Owen Lister, when I write dialogue for my characters, the two writers I think of are Quentin Tarantino and P.G. Wodehouse. Another Jeeves and Wooster. Okay, Claremont, Unqualified Comics. Claremont actually cared about Carol Danvers. I know it sounds odd these days. It shows that in Avengers Annual 10. The classic Ms. Marvel run holds up surprisingly well along with Brian Reed's run. I really liked Brian Reed's run. And when that ended, that really that was very disappointing. I really liked what he was doing with her, her and Jessica Drew, and trying to kind of recover and kind of get their lives together. They were kind of having these midlife crises, although they were still super hot. They'd gone through hell, and now they were trying to what to do with themselves. They were both dealing with the fact that they had been alcoholics. I thought that was cool. Claremont doesn't have censors anymore, which allows him to indulge in more of his kinks. Okay. Going through here. Chicken Sith. So many great stories during the Simon Claremont era of the X. Great art, great in all titles. Yeah, just people talk about art now. I said, no, we had something of a golden age of artists during that period where they were producing comics art rapidly at just ridiculously high quality. I mean, you just look at the image right here. I mean, we were getting this twice a month at one point. That good always. Body swap stories are probably taboo now thanks to the trans mafia. Well, okay. William Sova. Nice to listen to hear you guys talk about Claremont, but for me, even with all the good he did, he ultimately opened up a Pandora's box, which allowed weirdos a foothold in the corrupt industry. There is some truth to that. Do you mean with all his weird kinks or what? But definitely, yeah, he did. I won't argue with that. And the thing with the slippery slope argument, and I would say this applies to everything, including what's going on right now, is that the way to avoid the slippery slope, because the slippery slope should never be a good argument for the most part, is you have to have a culture that is responsible for itself. It takes individual responsibility and maturity, and we have got a very infantile culture right now. And so, yeah, slippery slope, you're just going to go right over the edge. Okay, unqualified comics. Start with, you're recommending where to start. Well, that's good for everybody. Welcome back, Ginell.
I'm sorry, my Surface died on me.
Oh, wow. Okay, hold on. Start from giant-sized X-Men from the late 70s and read all the way up to the 90s Claremont. It's all good. I agree. Okay, so what were you saying before you had your technical difficulties?
I completely forgot. I was panicking so bad. I was like, oh God. So do you remember?
No, but here's a comment I think you can talk about. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up soon. We've been on for about an hour and I'm kind of wearing down. The fact is, we could probably talk till midnight about this if we wanted to. And
if you're down to do another show, I worship X-Men. That's my favorite thing of all time in anything in pop culture.
If you want, we could get into individual characters, because one thing we didn't really talk, we just kind of referenced it, was the fact that in X-Men, you literally got to know each character and you saw them go through their own arc. And you could do that with each character and just talk about that. And
sure. I would just recommend not starting with Wolverine, because as much as I love the character, like, I think there's enough to talk about. I would like to talk about the other characters first.
Really? That he hadn't even come to mind. I figured everyone knows his arc.
Well, it's just, I think maybe it's because you've seen Wolverine so much and everybody wants to talk about Wolverine. I would actually like to maybe start with somebody like Psylocke or even Havoc.
You know what? Actually, Psylocke, Rogue, and Dazzler were very high on my list for each, because they weren't, again, loser characters until Claremont really built them up. And yeah, Havoc's another really great, he was the other Summers brother. That was all he was.
Yeah, that's what he was. He was plotline pusher for Cyclops whenever, they needed something to do with family and a family crisis. We could even talk about Polaris too. I mean, all definitely. I think Storm's another easy one. So maybe I think everyone probably already knows that whole. Well, if you wanted to talk about Forge, though, I don't think a lot of people know about Forge and what a brilliant character he was. For a while, Forge was my favorite character because he was just so damn interesting. Again, he was a techno wizard or techno shaman, but not in the way that we see them portrayed now. It was as if he happened upon it. It was a consequence of his upbringing. Yes. And I mean, it's almost like, I also felt like he had a bad luck cloud in a way. Oh yeah. Because he falls in love with the woman whose powers he stole. Yeah. Not meaning to harm her. And the Barry Windsor Smith love death arc that was drawn and written. Oh, and it was written by Claremont, but drawn by Barry Windsor Smith, and it was about their relationship. It was fantastic. I need to go find that.
Actually, maybe later I'll list all the books I have, and you can tell me where the gaps are.
Sure.
But okay, let's see. Yeah, I would like to do Forge definitely because that's a character that never got enough love.
I
And I know
agree.
that was interesting was that he created Forge, he introduced him, he had him ruin Storm's life, so everybody hated him. You remember that?
Exactly. Yes.
Everybody hated him, and then you get to know him, and you realize why he's the way he is.
Yes.
And that always appealed to me. And I guess now that I'm older and dealing with my own post-traumatic stress, there's kind of I've got a soft spot for those kinds of characters anyway. I mean,
He
for
was
when I was younger, it was like, yeah, he makes big fucking guns and he's a badass and he went to Vietnam. Now it's like, no, this guy has seen shit.
I think that he was meant to be like a character that veterans could step into and not associate. What's the word I'm looking for? They could kind of relate to him. He was having the flashbacks too.
Yeah,
He came home injured, missing a hand and a leg. How many
right.
Vietnam veterans came home missing limbs? You know, I mean, he's a fantastic character and just gets barely any love.
And
And
when he had his flashbacks, because he was a shaman, he really was summoning up his dead war
yeah,
buddies,
his dead war buddies would haunt him.
which,
And
that's got to be terrorizing.
oh, absolutely. And just, I mean, it's a shame that Marvel wasted such a great character
Yeah.
because they didn't know what to do with them because
No,
the guy that
they
created
didn't have
him.
a writer that could actually do it.
Oh no, I would be delighted if they could ever find a writer that could give him his own miniseries. But
Well,
you'd have to
they'd
find,
never hire me.
well, who knows? Maybe X-Men will get licensed out after all.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would love to do it. And I've written my share of characters struggling with post-traumatic stress. William Sonova, William Sonova had said earlier that Claremont does bear some of the blame for what we have today. And I asked him what he meant. And he says, the kinks were a tiny bit, but ultimately it was the change from superheroes to oppressed minorities, which attracted the race-obsessed and turned the X-Men into a one-trick pony. But the thing was, I get it. And I know that a lot of people for a long time, that was always Stan Lee's pitch is, oh, they're representing the minorities. They represent the, he was saying that they paralleled the civil rights movement, which is a total lie, actually. He just stuffed that in there when it was suddenly in the news because, well,
I thought they were a ripoff of the Doom Patrol
that's
because
what
that
they
came
were.
out first.
Right.
Yeah.
They were a Doom Patrol ripoff. And then Stan Lee saw a way to cash in and claimed it was about the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
But, ultimately, if you want the truth, okay, supposedly the original X-Men were a metaphor for the civil rights movement. Most of them came from wealthy New York or Manhattan families, wasn't it?
They were
And
all wealthy.
they were rich kids. They went to a private school. No. This is not a metaphor. Frankly, I took it as a metaphor more for the kids, the wealthy kids who grew up privileged in Manhattan, to be anything.
I was gonna say they're Martha Vineyard's brats.
Yeah, exactly. And it
Except
was,
for Cyclops, he actually did come from an orphanage in Nebraska. And
oh, okay.
yeah, he's the only one that wasn't rich, and that's why he could get away with being so broody. But yeah, Jean Grey grew up in Hudson on it was one of the hoity-toity neighborhoods. It was Hudson on Avalon or something.
And
But yeah,
Angel was a ladies' man.
yeah, he was supposed to be old money,
Yeah, it's
Beast.
like, yeah, I'm sure your average civil rights activist can relate to these characters.
I was gonna say, I take that back. Beast actually, his parents, I believe, were blue collar workers from Illinois.
So, getting back to the bit about the minorities, though, I think that conceit really did harm the X-Men overall. And what was interesting was I know that first they said it was race, and then later they decided, no, it's about gay people. To be honest with you, I think when Claremont was writing them, he wasn't writing either race or specifically gay as the metaphor happening. I think the Claremont metaphor was really people who were freaks or who dabbled in the taboo.
Oh,
That's really what I
absolutely.
think it was. It didn't really have anything to do with race.
They really were misfits. They were the people on the fringes of society that had they were, I guess you'd say, the people that have certain fetishes, certain
Yeah,
kinks. That's who they were. And the more and more you study about it, you go back and read it. Yeah, Claremont, he's a freak. He's got to
yeah.
be a freak.
And I would say as a parallel to that, for anybody who's seen the film Nightbreed, the director's cut only, and read the short story or the
Oh,
novella,
Cabal is such a good story. Sorry,
there's a, no,
that's my favorite.
really,
Yes, that's my favorite Clive Barker story. Is Cabal.
you read it and you realize it's kind of a similar thing. Cabal is really a metaphor for those people who engage in the taboo and the forbidden. Because it's very clear that in Nightbreed, oh yeah, sure, they're oppressed, but they really are monsters and they really do kill people.
Oh yeah.
That was that was part of the point. And I think the movie unfortunately really played up the who's the real monster thing, which wasn't the point of the story.
It was to me, it was fighting your own demons, but
Right.
finding out that you fit better with the monsters than the norms.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what it was to me. I mean, the main villain in the book, who you didn't really see much of, though I have to say I did appreciate that David Cronenberg played the villain in
Oh yeah.
the movie, because I like David Cronenberg. But yeah, I mean, it's a book where it's like, oh, so the monsters that actually kill people and eat human flesh are actually the good guys, but they're not good guys like you would think of them. They're actually the ones being hunted down.
They're being hunted, but they still really are
Yeah, they're
killers.
still they are ghouls, or some of them are ghouls.
And
I
it's
mean,
better they not live with anybody else.
that was the whole reason they had Meridian or Median. I'm sorry. Is
Yeah,
it Meridian
Midian.
or
No,
is
it's
it Median?
Midian.
Midian, thank you.
Midian is where the monsters are.
Yeah, they lived in a graveyard, in crypts and mausoleums. I mean, it was in a way that was so stereotypical, but there was a reason they lived there.
And
Nobody wanted to go.
their god that they worshipped under the earth in the movie, he's this weird idol, remember?
Yeah.
But just to hammer home the idea that it was a metaphor for being taboo, because Barker has some very strange desires. That is very clear.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. If you've read, he must. I really think that he likes the BDSM.
Yeah, that's
yes.
not even. But in the book, the god they worship isn't in the form of an idol. It's in a gigantic ejaculating penis that that never stops.
Yeah.
I mean, what more do you need?
When he dubs the main character, he renames him Cabal. He makes the guy ejaculate while he's And so I mean, that was definitely a book about freaks. But I love that. I want to read it again. I have to go pull it out.
I find it interesting. I think Barker is someone who has desires that should never be followed upon, and that his books are a way of dealing with it.
I know one of his assistants swears that he's got an ear to the mystical and the supernatural because of the way he translates things. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think that he has found a way to translate base desires into supernatural stories. Because not all of his books are horror books. I mean,
He's written a lot of fantasy.
Yeah, and Magica, I think, is his best fantasy story. I don't know if you've read Magica.
No,
if you haven't, I highly recommend it.
And then there was the one where it was the demon writing the confessional of why he left his gay demon lover in hell.
Oh, which one is that? Is that one of the books of blood?
Maybe. It was called Old Mr. Oh, I don't remember. Somebody in the chat's going to correct us.
Oh, I hope so.
But you listen to it, and at first you just think, okay, well, he's a demon, he's evil. Of course he's going to be into a lot of weird shit. But as you're listening to it, you're like, no, this is Barker. Yeah. This is a metaphor for Barker having a bad breakup.
If that is a metaphor for his bad breakup, I would really like to know what his reasoning behind the Scarlet Gospels was. I know that he said it was because he wanted to kill off Pinhead because he hated the character for what the movies had portrayed him as after, like what, number 5 and on, just Pinhead. Yeah. So he just wanted to kill off the character. But I don't know if you read Scarlet Gospels. There was more to it than just killing off Pinhead. There was like the whole explanation of hell and Lucifer and what hell really was. And part of it was a bureaucratic hierarchy.
Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty hellish. I mean, he is a Brit, by the way. I mean,
oh yeah, he's very British.
He knows about bureaucracy.
That's another book. I've read almost all of his books. I could totally sit and talk about Clive Barker too. I love the guy.
Well, how about this? I'm wearing down. We've been going for an hour and 20. Unfortunately, Kat can't do evenings much anymore because of school, so she can only do weekends. Do you want to join me again next Monday, and we'll talk Barker instead?
You know what? I think my weekend nights this weekend are free. So usually when I say weekends, when I say I'm not available for weekends, sometimes us as a family take off and do stuff. But I can be available some weekends. I can work it out.
Well, I don't know. I'll ask Kat if she wants to take part.
Oh, absolutely. I would love for her to take part.
I would too. But she's kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed right now.
Okay,
I think we all are.
Yeah, if she's feeling overwhelmed, I get it. I know that she's back in school. I keep putting it off. Every semester rolls back up. I'm like, nah, I can wait one more semester.
But real quickly before we go, please, before you leave the chat, go look down in the description. There are links to follow me on BitChute and Rumble. Please do that, because God knows how long I'm going to be here.
What, are you on Minds yet, or?
Yeah, I reactivated my Minds account today.
Okay, I was thinking about starting a Minds account, but I wasn't sure.
I just don't care for the interface, but if it's what everyone's using, I'll use it. I mean, at this point, I just want to stay in touch with my friends, and you guys are my friends, so.
That's how I feel. Like, that's the only reason I haven't left Twitter yet, is how am I going to be able to talk to you or Kat or Kronk
exactly.
or Chicken Sith? Like, that's the only time I get to talk to everybody. It's like, I hate everything else about Twitter, but like, there's that little light in the darkness that's my friends that I can run to and be like, hey, what's up? Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that going through and purging 2/3 of my follows did make this, and then privating my account, so only people I like can read my tweets, really has improved my life.
I think that's what I'll do. I was thinking about doing that with all my social media, is just purging like 90% of it. And
yeah, and really just follow people who are following me and that I'm a friend with. That's so anyway, that is enough for the evening. Thank you for joining. We should do this again. And are you free on Mondays?
I am free on Mondays. I don't go to martial arts practice on Monday nights, so I'm free.
Well, see, yeah, then maybe we can do Mondays if Kat's not up to doing on the weekend, just so it's not just me here talking to the audience, because I don't know, for a while, the weekly show, that's just me now. It's just me reading the comments and talking to everyone. So it'd be nice to actually have a co-host again. And I can even like bring other people on from time to time if they want.
Oh, absolutely. I should try and convince my husband to join us, because he's got as much X-Men information as I do. And he was a Forge fan. So
cool.
Yes, he's just as much of a geek as I am.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining me and Ginell. And hopefully we can come back next week and talk about Clive Barker.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my goodness. That would be fun.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Night, guys.